Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back once again. We are back live again for everybody. It's been a minute. As always, we're coming to you from the greatest country in the world, the great Republic of Texas, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas, more specifically. If you guys aren't already subscribers, please consider smashing that subscribe button as well as that bell icon so you don't miss an episode in the future when we go live or when we post an episode. Also, don't forget to smash that like button for us. That'll really help us out with the algorithms as well. If you are on the go and want to check us out, you can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. If you love what we do here on the show and you're feeling generous, please consider sharing the show with a friend, family member, or colleague. It would really help us out as well. Any questions for myself, as always, or our guest, as well as guest or topic recommendations, you can shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on social media, everything will be linked down below. Twitter, Getter, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble. All our platforms will be in the link tree, as you can see in the show notes as well. Yeah, so it's been a minute. I know everybody, we came back a while ago, had some great shows on. Then we kind of disappeared again, but we are back again. It seems like that's a recurring thing that goes on around here. But as everybody knows, life happens and things kind of get in the way and kind of disappear for a bit. But we always make a comeback bigger and better. So from now on, we'll be hitting it hard up until Christmas, New Year's. And then after that, some great shows coming up. We were supposed to jump on a show. I think everybody noticed last week with Preston Dennett. But we had a little bit of issue with the program software that we run. Switch companies, tried their stuff out for a bit. Turned out they didn't work all that well. So we had to kind of revert back. So that show got bumped. Working with Preston to come on after the holidays. He was gracious enough to kind of jump on prior to. Didn't work. I get everybody's getting ready for Christmas and the New Year. So we'll let all that kind of slow down a bit before we start going heavy on the shows again. But yeah, back once again, and back with a great one, actually. We're joined today by Miss Dona Masi. Miss Masi is a writer, editor, whose short fiction and articles are used in reading and writing assessments throughout the U.S. Articles are about the arts and environment and current affairs, have appeared in Foster's Daily Democrat, Seacoast Newspapers, and Portsmouth Press. She's also a playwright, and two of her plays actually were performed at the Provincetown Theater Company. In her fiction, as and in her playwrights, she loves bringing relatable characters to life and depicting them in all their heroic and flawed humanity. Her debut novel, The Taking, was inspired by her interest in UFO folklore and reports of alien encounters. So that's actually really quite up our alley, especially if everyone's been keeping up with the news lately. We've got all this thing going on with all these drones and stuff going around. So not sure it's all that related, but it's very interesting and very on topic with what we discuss here. So without further ado, Miss Dona Masi. Miss Masi, how are you doing today?
Hi. Hi, Paul. How are you? It's good to
I'm
be
doing
here.
absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. As I mentioned, everybody's pretty much getting ready for the holidays. Christmas is coming up, so everybody's kind of rocking and rolling. And I appreciate you taking the time out today.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. Of course. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Sure, absolutely. So we, everything that you're kind of focusing on here is really up our alley. When pretty much what we do here. So we're all interested in UFO alien abductions and all those kinds of things. Obviously, everybody is very interested in the topic for the most part. But I do see that this was your debut book, and to kind of focus on this, I would say, fringe topic for the most part. Was there some kind of reason why you wanted to do that? Were you always interested in UFOs yourself, or how did that come about?
Well, yeah, I've always been interested in UFOs. I can't remember a time when I really wasn't fascinated by UFO stories. And, it started back in my childhood and then just went on and on from there. And I would read about them. I watched a ton of UFO documentaries. I kind of was really gravitated to that subject. And So eventually it led me to write The Taking, which is a novel about UFO UFOs and abductions. And so it came really out of that interest, and then a lot of things that I did along the way too regarding that.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I mean, people have been writing about UFOs and abductions for a long time. Was there any kind of personal, I guess, influence behind it? Any kind of stories that you had heard over the
Yeah.
years from families and friends, things like that?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, a few things. I mean, I live in New Hampshire, which, like
Right.
Texas, is kind of a hotbed for UFO activity historically. It's
Mm.
the state where the Betty and Barney Hill UFO alien abduction occurred back in 1961. So you probably know, that's a pretty legendary story. And
Right.
there have been other stories from New Hampshire too. So the state that I live in, and grew up most of when I was a kid, is ripe with those kind of stories. And my mom and I were really interested in it together, so we used to talk about it a lot. And I think maybe her interest probably influenced me. On top of that, I believe that I was an experiencer when I was a really young kid, probably only about no, I think I was about 7 years old, and I saw something. And to tell you the truth, I can't be sure that it was a real alien spacecraft, but
Mm.
I'd never really thought about, excuse me, aliens or UFOs before, very much at least before. And
Right.
I happened to see something in the sky when I was at school, and it was recess. And I looked up, and there was a silver cigar shaped object above me. I don't know. It looked like it was pretty low in the sky, only a couple hundred feet. The tips on the left and the right were um, disguised between two clouds that were on either side of it. I thought it had
Sure.
windows. Um, and so I was looking at it, and I just was wondering what it was. And I had the thought in my head, that looks like a plane, but it doesn't have any wings. And so I looked away from it for a second, and I looked back up, and I remember that I seemed to have a sense that there was a period of lost time, just a couple split seconds that I couldn't account for, which is kind of like if you faint. I don't know if you've ever fainted, but you black out.
Right.
It's not like sleeping at all. It's like just you lose total. You just black out. Your consciousness is
Sure.
completely gone. It's nowhere. So it was like that. And when I looked away, and then I looked back up, it was still there in the sky above me. And I just got really scared when I looked back up on it at it for some reason or another. The other odd thing was that it was recess, and I was suddenly all alone in the playground, and there weren't any other kids around. So I just took off running because I was afraid. I also was worried that, being late to class, I'd get in trouble. So I ran back to school, ran in the classroom, and I was thinking to myself, oh, the teacher's going to be mad at me for being late. But the strange part was that when I walked into the classroom, the teacher didn't even notice me. She didn't react, she didn't say anything, and neither did any of the other kids. And I walked over to my desk, and I just sat down, and it was as if the moment that I sat down at my desk, I forgot about the entire thing. And then it would come back to me, the memory, throughout my life. And then I'd lose it again, forget all about it again. It would come back. This happened over and over until sometime in my adulthood, it finally stuck in my conscious mind. And it's been there ever since. And I haven't had another time when I've forgotten it. So that was my one and only experience. As I said, I can't be sure it was real, but it was very vivid. It still is in my memory, you know, and I
Mm.
saw a lot of detail.
Yeah, those are always rough. There's been a lot of instances. I can speak personally to that as well. That where you kind of feel like it might be true. You're not quite sure if you've actually seen it or not, or actually dreamt it, or however
Yeah.
that happens. But I think that's on purpose. You know, they if they do come for you, they make sure that you have a hard time remembering anything at all. If you do, and even if you kind of remember some things, it's not so clear. You kind of doubting yourself whether it actually happened or not. That's
Mm.
always the worst kind of feeling, I believe. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's very, I guess it's kind of hard to believe in things that you haven't really experienced yourself all that much. I think a lot of people want to believe that there's actually something out there, but they kind of have a hard time making that leap, for things like that, especially when you hear some of these stories about aliens and abductions and things like that. But um, it's definitely quite interesting. I think I fall in the same kind of category as yourself, believing that I've seen a few things here and there, not quite sure. All I go off of is like stories and other things that I've heard from people. It's quite unfortunate because obviously we all want to know for sure, but it's just like just out of grasp. You're not really entirely sure what's going on and if things are real. But having been uh, privy to information while being in the military, it's kind of hard to really nail down who to trust and who not to trust. When you hear stories like that, so it's rough. But all we can really go off of is faith and just kind of your own beliefs of things like that. So it's a hard uh, place to be in specifically, but I guess we can kind of lean on that a little bit more. Now, obviously, we all kind of were in the same boat, I would think, for those of us that are kind of interested in this field.
Hmm.
Obviously, we all pretty much think that the government knows a lot more than they actually do when it comes to these kinds of topics. Now, do you have any kind of thoughts on why they would be hiding information about UFOs one way or the other?
Well, sure. I mean, there could be multiple reasons. I think a couple of the main ones may be because, well, if the government has recovered alien spacecrafts, they may be trying to reverse engineer the technology if they haven't already, and they want to keep that top secret. And the other reason is that I perhaps they're concerned about if the truth were to come out, that it would create, worldwide panic, and they don't want that to happen. And it would be a real upheaval of a lot of things that we believe about our existence and our reality and our world. And maybe it would mean even a loss of control for people who really wield a lot of power in this world. I would suppose. Those are my theories anyway. I mean, they're not original. That's what people do say, and I tend to believe that makes sense to me. Those reasons why that might be so, why they're hanging on to the truth and won't be honest with us. Sometimes I wonder, everybody talks about the government having a disinformation campaign about UFOs, to make us believe that they don't exist or to make us believe that they do exist in order to hide some other secrets. I mean, until we know for sure, we just really don't know. It's just pure speculation, wild speculation sometimes. But what else are you left to do but to wildly speculate when people in who do know or who are most likely to know the truth um, won't come clean with it? So,
Right.
in my book, The Taking, I was I really just wanted to explore a topic that I've been extraordinarily interested in and that I've researched along the way, and that has sparked my imagination. And
Mhm.
I wanted to explore the human impact, the impact on people from their encounters. Because I think it's a human centered story as well as like, um, one about the universe or the cosmos or intergalactic travel. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Absolutely. We all kind of forget on, kind of what happens to people and, when they interact with such things. I mean, the human level of that part of it is really quite hard to understand. When someone says like, "Oh, I had a UFO experience," or "I saw something," everybody just kind of laughs it off, like, "Oh yeah, this guy's kind of crazy," or whatever. But we don't really
Yeah.
think about what that person's going through on the inside. When they actually did see something, and like how are they dealing with it internally or between their family. I mean, I come from a Hispanic family, so like those kinds of things are not believed really for the most part. And you say things like that, and if people are just like, you're crazy, like you just saw whatever, or it's like explained away as something else completely, or like coming from a Mexican household, it's more of like you saw a demon, or things like that. Like they're just kind
Hmm.
of explained away more to more of like our understanding here. And
Yeah.
nobody really quite gets what those people are going through, especially if you come from a family that's more closed off to those things. But I
Yeah.
mean, kind of growing up, I don't know, in your area, you're way up there, and down here in Texas, it's a lot different, obviously. But do did people kind of like around you understand? Did your parents kind of understand these things as well? Were they more closed off to it?
Well, my mom was really open-minded, and I think my dad was interested. He didn't, follow it like I did, but he was pretty open-minded about it. Both my parents were. I don't know if that was true generally of most people. I suppose, especially when I was growing up. I mean, now I think there's more openness about it. People are more open about it. Um, One reason is because we're discovering so much about our universe. I mean, we're just being there's you hear fascinating stories about what scientists are discovering about black holes, et cetera, and other worlds, and the likelihood or the possibility that some of them could be inhabited, and how many planets there actually are out there, billions and billions of stars. So that makes it seem like a more plausible idea, I think, to people than ever before, when you see how big the universe is, for instance. And I theories about, well, maybe there's parallel universes, anti-universes, and all of those things. Of course, not everybody believes, and I think we're kind of
Mm,
pre-programmed as human beings to doubt ourselves when we see something like that. Like, we got to have proof. We've got to have, I don't know, maybe it landing in our backyards or something to believe it, or for somebody
right.
else to believe it. And so, one of the things, if you're an experiencer, and you probably would think so too, one of the issues with that is that if you really see something strange, a UFO or an alien, and it's just so mind blowing, I that you're like, "Oh my god, this is real." And it's if you're that sure about it, this is real. And what do I do with that information? I mean, how can I wrap my head around it when yesterday it wasn't real and now it is, because I have seen it and I can't deny what I've seen. And then the other piece is, you touched on that a lot of people aren't going to believe you. They're just going to dismiss it. So you don't want to talk about it because you
Hmm.
feel like you're going to be mocked, or
Right.
someone's going to think you're crazy. I think that's one of the, and especially with people who believe that they've been abducted by aliens. That's really hard on them, and it causes a lot of isolation. In my book, that my novel, The Taking, that's one of the central ideas is, how does a person deal with it, when, especially if they're not believed, or if they're afraid to share it because they won't be believed, and the loneliness that causes. You know what I mean?
Right. No, absolutely. It's quite. I mean, if you hang out in the circles that I kind of hang out with, when we're all kind of on the same boat with these things, it's. I guess I would say it's not like everybody just blindly accepts it, but we're all more open to the idea that something might have happened. We're willing to like listen and talk about
Hmm.
it. Like, hey, let's kind of put our heads together and see what was going on. I think these kinds of circles, the fact that people are open to it, it's great. Everybody kind of puts stories out or things that they saw and things like that, and they're more open to it. But I definitely understand for sure. Not wanting to say anything to like maybe a coworker or somebody that you just kind of know like offhand or whatever. It's very unnerving. Obviously, the first thing you don't want to be labeled as is like, oh, you're like that guy that believes in aliens or whatever, and maybe things like that. So it's definitely terrifying to a lot of people. I understand it. It's kind of in that same boat, like I mentioned when I was growing up. But I was lucky enough to where I had a younger sister and an older brother, and we all kind of in the same kind of realm of these things, where we all kind of believe this and that. Especially like I mentioned, growing up in a Mexican household, there's a lot of like witchcraft, not witchcraft kind of thing, but like brujeria is what it's called. It's more like voodoo kind of stuff and
Yeah.
Mexican kind of deal. So we kind of believe more in the spiritual realm, but we're very open to these kinds of ideas of everything from UFOs and aliens to like witches and things like that. So it's a very mystical world that we're all very engaged in, which is great. But you come from another part of the world or the country here that doesn't believe in anything like that. It's very you're just kind of like on an island by yourself. Nobody wants to say anything, and I believe that for as much coverage we get on this topic, I believe that it's not even scratching the surface, because I think that a lot more people are just afraid to come forward. Like a lot of stories out there that nobody's ever heard of for that simple fact. Maybe somebody that's has a great job and they like high stature, make a lot of money, or work within the government, don't want to say anything because they could lose all of that. And that's very true.
Hmm.
Coming from the military background, if you're a pilot and you see something and you report it, like you're done. Your entire career's over. If you're an officer, the same thing. Even if you're lower enlisted, you get sent to like a psych eval and you're done. Like nobody wants to give all that up. So there are a lot of barriers in place to make sure that whether it's intentional or not, that a lot of people don't say anything. So it's very
Yeah.
frustrating, especially for someone like myself.
Well, I've heard a lot of stories from people in the military, mainly in documentaries I've watched and such, who have said the very same thing. And what about, oh God, I know I'm going to get the name of the base of the forest in England wrong. I always do. But the story from
Rendlesham?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
those guys
Mhm.
they have stories to tell about being, completely intimidation campaign against them to keep their mouths shut about it. And
Right.
one of the guys, oh, I forgot his name, but he said that there was the Air Force pretty much erased any records of him ever having been in the Air Force after that
Mhm.
event, and a lot of other terrible things that occurred. So that's just one example. And airline pilots too. I mean, the stigma that's on them.
Sure.
And,
It's
they
probably
seem
even worse, I think.
yeah, maybe it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think the military is opening up a little bit? I mean, and allowing, it seems to be they're allowing their personnel to speak out, at least some of them, about what they've seen.
Sure. I mean, obviously, we've seen a lot of things over the past few years, like the footage from the Navy pilots and all those kinds of things. But I'm kind of torn between those things because I believe that information like that is used as cover up for other things that are like in the news or other big events. So I don't think that they're willingly like just releasing information. I think
Hmm.
they're releasing it because there's other things going on in the news and they want to kind of sleight of hand it. Look over here, when this is going on over
Yeah.
here. So I mean, I don't have no doubt that some of that stuff is true, especially if they have it on recording. Um, but it's not like they want to let it go. I'm sure there's like a lot of information that they're just sitting on, but I believe it's used strategically to cover other things up in the news or things like that. So
Yeah.
um, I think sure there's information out there that they could just let out, but I think they use it precisely and specifically for certain things. It's just like it's unfortunate because I'm sure they're sitting on some great stuff, but they won't release anything unless it's like necessary. I think
Mm.
it's just kind of what I've always thought. I mean, having been on an aircraft carrier for several years, there are things in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the night that you see that you cannot explain. And I wouldn't have never have said anything while I was in the military for that reason. So I was under the same thumb as well as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But like nobody wants to be like that one guy. I mean, I could tell you for sure that there are many people in the military that believe a lot of that stuff. They've seen a lot of crazy
Yeah.
things that come from outside of this world and things that come from within this world, especially in the ocean. Like USOs are like a huge thing as well.
Right.
And it's wild. Everything's out there. You just, like I said, there's just great stories out there that'll never come out because people just don't want to say anything, and it's very unfortunate because of the stigma that comes with it. Obviously I get it, and you're demonized and people make fun of you and you're like labeled that UFO guy or that weird guy that believes in this and that. It's just like nobody wants to go through that, so it's unfortunate.
Can I ask you? I was wondering. I mean, I know that if you're in the military, you're not supposed to go public with this stuff. At least, maybe
Sure.
not without the okay. But did you talk about it among yourselves ever? The
Yeah,
guys on the ship
absolutely.
and
With each other, yeah. I wouldn't say it's anything like, unless you're spoken to or you're debriefed and you're told specifically not to talk about certain things. If you're read into programs or information that is supposed to be secret, things like that, that's a different story. But when you're just kind of with each other and like you see things, it's like, oh, I just see like, yeah, I saw this and that last night, blah, blah. That's, that's fine. Like, like I mentioned, unless they come to you and they say specifically, that thing you saw last night, yes, you didn't see that. Okay,
okay,
roger
I get
that.
it.
But yeah, like, but if it's nothing like that, then everybody just kind of talks amongst each other and things like that. So it's not that big of a deal unless it starts making waves and there's things like that. But no pun intended. But it's just kind of one of those things. Everybody sees something, especially when you're in the middle of the ocean. It's crazy, being in the middle of the Pacific or something, 3 o'clock in the morning, standing watch on the flight deck, and then you just kind of see stuff that shouldn't be out there, lights or whatever. It's just
Did
wild.
you ever feel scared when you saw stuff like that?
More not because of seeing things, more so just kind of being out there in the middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
and pitch black. I mean, standing on the beach at night is kind of creepy. Now, being thousands of miles away from land in the middle of the night, um, with no lights on, there's stars obviously, but like it's pitch black and there's no light out, and it's just like the craziest thing. It's like just knowing that you're in the middle of the ocean and there's nowhere to go. That's
Like
more
you're all alone in the world, huh? Kind of.
absolutely. Even though you're on that ship, but there's nothing out there. It's just everywhere you turn, there's like thousands of miles of nothing, just water. That's
Yeah,
more creepy. I'm more worried about what's under the ocean at that point than what's in the sky.
sure.
It's some of the wildest stuff, but I mean, there's stories and stories that people have told me and things that we've kind of seen and done, and like it's just the craziest thing that I wish I had proof. I can tell these stories like thousands of times, and nobody will ever believe me because I can't prove them. It's just
Mm.
based off of what we saw and other people that we've spoken to. And it's unfortunate. Like it's just one of those things. I could tell anybody stories for days, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah," and like whatever. Like nobody would believe me. It's
Right.
very unfortunate. There's just no way to prove it. Like,
I
which is
believe you.
yeah, absolutely no. There's some people, yeah, but it's just like it's some of the wildest things is just being like in the fog of war, and you see things, and like I said, in the middle of the ocean, you see things, and other people that you speak with have stories, and you guys have seen things together on watch at night or even during the day. And used to work at a secret installation, South Carolina, that's like in the middle of the forest, and that's some other crazy stuff that goes on. It's crazy. Was glad I'm glad that I got to experience it, but it's just some of the wildest stuff ever.
Yeah. I wish I had proof that what I saw long time ago, whether it was real or not, no to know one way or the other. I mean, this just that's the thing. I have no proof other than what I observed and my memory of it. I suppose if I wanted, I could be hypnotized and see. Well,
Right.
even that can. Who knows whether that would really reveal the truth or not? But because there's some you don't know whether hypnosis really you're going to be recalling something that really happened. But at any rate, that is the only way that I can think of that maybe I could, find out whether it was or not.
Right.
Unless I
Yeah.
searched
Yeah.
the headlines or something in the newspaper in that town from long ago to see if there were any reports of somebody seeing something on the same day or around the same day, if you know
Sure.
what I'm
No, it's
saying.
definitely a lot easier now. You could do that. Everything's digital nowadays, which is great.
Yeah, maybe I should
Unless,
try sometime.
sure. I mean, depending on how big the town is, it's local records. They have them like in the libraries, things like that. But for the most part,
Yeah.
everything's digital nowadays. So it's great to look back at stuff on certain days. So I mean, so I guess kind of when it came down to the book, were those kind of stories that you had collected over time, or how did that kind of all play out as far as putting the book together? Was it
Mhm.
just kind of based off your experience, or how did that work out for you?
Well, it's not the story in the novel, The Taking, isn't based on my personal experience, or really, specific reports by other people, but it's sort of but I do use the details and reported characteristics of, UFOs encounters and abductions that I've read about and that many people have reported because there's a commonality to the details, to a large degree that people report when they say they have these experiences. So I was based on my knowledge of those after doing a lot of reading. Um, and the story, not the story itself, but some of the central ideas were inspired by a John Mack, Dr. John Mack. And
Okay.
are you familiar with him? He
I
was
yes, I am.
yeah, the Harvard psychiatrist who back in the 80s and 90s treated, I think, almost 100 people who were reported symptoms of trauma and fear, and they seemed to be related to paranormal experiences, which Dr. Mack and thought were from seemed a lot like UFO and alien abduction experiences. And he went from being a skeptic, open-minded, but a skeptic of UFOs and abductions to, an outspoken believer of them. So I read a book by him called Abductions, Human Encounters with Aliens. And,
Okay.
that really got me thinking about the idea of, boy, what's the impact on people who go through this? I mean, it must be really hard. I can only imagine. It was the first time, even though I had been interested in the topic for years and years, I'd never thought of it that way, from how it would impact people. how it did impact people, until I read his book. So that got me to thinking, and then I started thinking, that could be a really interesting and suspenseful story for a novel. And so that's my, interest in it came together with some of the ideas that I got from Mac's books. And
Right.
I used that was really the thematically, that's where I drew some of my ideas, and that's how the story shaped up. So it explores that idea. It's so it's about UFOs and abductions, and it's in the heart of the story, because it's also a realistic story too, and it has these paranormal elements. And it's about a father and daughter and their relationship, and it's about friendships and love and courage and difficult truths, really.
Right. Do you
And
think?
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No,
Oh no, I was just going
I
to
was
add,
just
it's just, okay, you don't know something's happening to you. You don't know what's happening, but somehow or another it's having some kind of effect on you subconsciously that's spilling over into your ordinary life and making you
right.
upset, driving your behavior, your reactions, your interactions with other people, your outlook on the world, your perception of yourself. Um, and so, that's part of the book as well.
Sure. Now, was it kind of, I guess, um, I guess more of like trying to convince people that are kind of on the fence that it's okay to kind of reach out, speak to people about it? Do you think that would kind of help people out as well when it comes to reading your book? I mean, there's kind of a struggle between, like you mentioned, wanting to say things and wanting to keep it secret to yourself and not wanting to look like the crazy person and stuff. But do you think that would kind of help people? I guess maybe not specifically blaringly, but it would kind of give them the idea that, maybe I could speak with somebody. Maybe I should look to somebody to speak with, to kind of get this off my chest. Would that kind of help out a little bit?
I
Maybe kind
I
of
would
reading your
hope,
book there.
yeah. I hope so. I hope so. I think I paint a story of people who eventually are able to talk about it, and but people who have been hiding it for so long. And so, both of them have different ultimately, it turns out very differently for both of them. From the one who kept it bottled up because there was no one who wanted to listen, nobody believed him, and somebody else who had more empathetic people in their life. So I
Mhm.
hope that I mean, I would like to think that it might help people in a similar situation to try to seek out people that they think they could trust the most. I also hope that people who read the book, if they ever happen to know somebody who is an abductee, or if they just think about the idea of, what people who are experiencers, who've had a traumatic abduction experience, to think about what they go through, what and to have some empathy for that experience, whether they ever know anybody or not who's been through it. But just to realize that it would be a traumatic experience. And to get over it or to deal with it, there'd be a lot of, post-traumatic stress involved too, I would imagine, or there could be. Um, some people report having positive experiences when they're abducted or with encounters with aliens. Others, it's dark and terrifying.
Mm.
So, but either way, it's kind of mind-blowing because all of a sudden you're confronted with the knowledge that there's another reality other than our own. I mean, there might be a million different realities, but you're confronted one that is just out of this world and like nothing that we experience in our human form on this planet, unless we happen to be somehow or another have some exposure to it, either because we seek it out or because it just happens for whatever reason, either by design or we're just coincidentally. So, I I hope that it will be thought provoking in that way to people who read it.
Yeah. No, it's always, I mean, everybody's looking for a little push, a little help, which is unfortunate that they would have to live with these kinds of issues, on their own, kind of being afraid. It's,
Yeah.
for one thing, you're already afraid of what you experienced. And then on the other hand, you're afraid to ask for help. So I can only imagine what kind of life that would pan out, like in the end. It would be kind of hard to kind of live in between both of those worlds.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
unfortunate for a lot of people, I'm sure.
And people, another thing about the abduction experience, and you just touched on this, you really don't have any control over your own life. Um, you don't know when it's going to happen next, if it's going to happen next. And so that creates a lot of tension, I think, in your daily life. It's maybe it's hard to make plans for the future. Maybe it's hard to live a normal life in some way, or you have to try harder. You have to find some way to have a normal life and try to be happy, despite what's happening to you, you know?
Right.
And then think about the other people around you, perhaps, or because especially, if this can run in families as well. So if you're having it and you're worried about your one of your kids being abducted or some other family member, I mean that's a whole nother piece of it because
Right.
so they say that happens too.
Right.
So there's a lot to deal with. And as I
Absolutely.
said,
Having
I
to
hadn't really
having to
stopped and
plan.
thought about it until I
Right.
started, read Mac's book, and then I started to think about writing a novel about it. And as an author, wanting to delve into those issues, I had to really think in depth about it and try to imagine it, the experience for the characters.
Sure. No, yeah. I mean, I can only imagine that existence. You mentioned having to plan for the future and things. I can barely plan for this Texas weather. I could just imagine having to plan for UFO abductions, and especially if you know that things are going to be happening often, like a lot of people do. They experience almost nightly, weekly, things like that.
Yeah,
You not only have to worry about yourself, but maybe you got kids that they could get involved somehow, whether you like it or not. That would be very unfortunate and very stressful. I wouldn't be able to kind of live with that whole ordeal, especially there's no way to, I mean, who do you go to help stop it? Like, how do you even try to start figuring out how that's done? It's just like
right.
there's nothing
You
you can
can't
do,
stop it. I mean,
obviously.
I don't know how you can. Maybe there is a way. I mean, that's the characters go through that in the taking too, because they realize they can't stop it. And it just, it's they don't even want to face it that it's true because they know that there's nothing they can do about it. So it takes a while for them to accept that it's true for this character who's going through it, you know?
Right. It's very nerve wracking. It's, I mean, so I guess, I mean, I'm very curious to, kind of find out, if you've ever heard any kind of crazy off the wall UFO stories. I mean, I have a few of my own, but is there anything like specific to the area that you're from that's more like on the famous kind of side of story that everybody knows, or is there just any kind of you know obscure kind of story that you found very interesting?
Um, well, the Betty and Barney Hill is very fascinating to me, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, um,
Right.
because it's one of the most famous and credible reports of a UFO abduction. And it also seems to be the first modern UFO abduction story. I mean, we'd heard about the Greys of Roswell and et cetera, and these 4 foot tall, aliens
Right.
before, but that's when we really started having like a dark darker version of these aliens and what they might want from us, etc. And a lot of the experiences that you heard about, or that people have reported since, which of course that was over 60 years ago, that Betty and Barney Hill had their UFO abduction experience, um, are have some of this, a lot of the same details, the descriptions of the aliens and the crafts and what happened to them once they were taken on board the spaceship. So there's that story. There's also another pretty famous story, in from New Hampshire, and both of these are like right around where I live, like Portsmouth. Well, where the Hills lived, they were on their way back to their home in Portsmouth through the White Mountains in New Hampshire. They were coming back from Canada, but Portsmouth is right near where I live, in which is in Dover, New Hampshire. And the other event is, it was in Exeter, New Hampshire, which is not far from me either. It's only about 20 minutes. And this was long ago, but there have been a lot of other sightings since. But this was in 1965, and it's called UFO. The incident at Exeter. And actually, the
Right.
city of Exeter has a UFO festival every year in September on Labor Day weekend to sort of celebrate these events. But over the course of a few days back then, um, there were numerous UFO sightings, and they were witnessed by a lot of people, including, you know, cops, police officers. It started one night when this young guy was hitchhiking home. He was visiting his girlfriend. He was hitchhiking home. It was late at night. And this craft came out of nowhere, a saucer shaped thing, and hovered in the middle of the road right in front of him. And it just was there for, minutes. Anyway, it freaked him right out. And then it took off. And he was just like, a car finally came by, and he stood out in front of the car, and he waved his arms. He was screaming and yelling and begging the people to take him to the police station so he could report it. So they did. And one of the officers went out with him to the site. They were investigating. And while they were there, the UFO came back, and they observed it for quite a while. And then, so the police officer was with the young guy. I think his name was Norm something, the young guy. Anyway, he
Norm.
radioed for another officer to come out, and he did. And the UFO was still there when that other officer came. So there were three of them that witnessed this thing for about 20 minutes. And then on top of that, that same night and the night after that, right in that general vicinity, other people reported seeing UFOs, being like tracked by them when they were driving in their car. And one officer from that town, Exeter, um, was on patrol. It was late, and there was a car pulled over on the side of the road, and the engine was running, the lights were on, and he pulled up behind it. I guess he thought maybe they needed help or seeing what they were doing. So there was a woman in the car, and she was like absolutely hysterical, puddle of because she was terrified. She had been chased by a UFO that she said was right above her car, the lights beaming down on her for the longest time, and then it went away. And so there were several people who had those same similar experiences within the course of a few days. So that was a very famous incident too, namely because it was witnessed by so many people, and there were police officers involved. And it was picked, right at, there isn't any more at the time, but there used to be an Air Force base right near here, Pease Air Force Base, and, it was picked up on their radar too. And supposedly they sent jets out to, follow it, but they denied that it ever happened, that they were up there, but people saw the planes, following it, trying to catch up. So from my neck of the woods, those are two pretty interesting stories, and there's a number of more. Do you know Kathy Martin, the ufologist, by chance? Have
I've
you
heard the
heard of
name,
her?
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Kathleen Martin. I've spoken with her. She appears at a lot of symposiums for UFOs. She writes about them a lot. She's also a sociologist, and she delves into a lot of the sociological phenomena piece of it, psychological piece of it too. And she's a believer and an experiencer. And she's also the niece of Betty and Barney Hill.
Mm.
And so she grew up with this story. She heard about it when it happened from Betty and Barney. She was 13 years old at the time. But Betty, you know, excuse me, Kathy um, has a lot of fascinating stories about what happened to her family too. That's amazing. And talk about it running in families.
Right.
That And they used to go out with Betty and look for UFOs sometimes, and they would see them, according to Kathy. And as I said, Kathy herself had her own experiences. And Kathy even told me, and this is really wild, that Kathy even told me that her grandmother, Betty's mother, used to say to her, "Well, Betty, you tell those alien friends of yours that, why don't they just, anytime they want to come by for coffee, to come by." So,
Right.
which is kind of crazy. And I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I don't know why Kathy would lie because she's not that kind of person. And she investigates all these things. Um, but she said one night, like around 2 o'clock in the morning, her mother was woken up by this beaming, brilliant light that was beaming on the house. And she was kind of too scared to get out of bed. She was thinking, oh my God, did they come? And then there were
Right.
all these knocks on the door. And she didn't get up. She was terrified. But the whole family thinks that they came and they took her up on her invitation to come and
Right.
visit her face to face. So who knows? But many strange things. Just down the street from me a couple of years ago, I read about this on the MUFON, New Hampshire MUFON site. And this
Right.
is just like 2 miles down my road, that there were 2 cars driving down, and it was at night again. They're driving on the road, and they saw a gigantic UFO craft, saucer-shaped, hovering above some trees on the road. And the person who wrote about the event said the car in front of him was obviously saw it too, because they kind of stopped like this or slowed down, and then they took off going about like 70 miles an hour down this road.
Right.
And this guy right behind him saw it too, you know? And it was very vividly written, like something was there. And the tone of it was that it really unnerved them too. So I look up in the sky all the time.
Right. No, yeah, we kind of take it for granted, and obviously a lot of people are nowadays looking down at their phones or not really paying attention to the sky, and it's unfortunate. It's just up there, and it's obviously this giant sky that's above us, and nobody really pays attention all that much, which is quite unfortunate. But I mean, even nowadays, light pollution and all that kind of stuff, it's a lot harder to kind of make out what's going on up there. So unless you're specifically looking for something, nobody really pays attention to it, which is unfortunate. But I'm sure there's a lot of things going on up there that nobody really pays attention to. Nobody really notices.
Yeah, I know,
Seems
it's
like
too bad. But people
yeah,
are probably looking at a lot of UFO videos on their phones too these days.
that's true. That's very true. I mean, there's seems to be a large interest in UFOs lately. Obviously, a lot of people kind of believe in them for the most part, I guess. Here and there, you have a lot of people that don't, obviously, but um, you know, it's just one of those topics that people are always looking for more information on, and with all these new videos that are coming out lately and all these things that are happening up there in New Jersey, like it's wild now. Like, are they drones or UFOs or whatever's going on, and they have a lot of conflicting stories from the government and local law enforcement, and it's just like you don't know who to believe. But um, like I mentioned previously, there's a lot of things that I think are kind of in the pocket of whoever's in charge of them for for like occasions. Like if there's something going on huge in the world, they're gonna be like, all right, well, let's roll out this UFO footage that we captured, and then we'll just kind of throw their focus off a little bit from here, and we'll be doing stuff on this side.
Yeah.
So I kind of
Like,
think that
maybe
plays
it'll
into a lot of it.
satisfy their curiosity, satisfy people if we reset just give them a little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always just like a video or two here and there that's kind of decent, but doesn't really show too much. And maybe there's a witness or two here and there, but it's like it 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 gets people's attention just enough to kind of get over what's going on in the news or what's going on around the world, which is quite unfortunate because nowadays people's attention span is like almost zero. So even if you were to see
Yeah.
something major, like they just flash something else and oh look, there's another shiny thing over there, and then it's just gone. Like, so it's very unfortunate. But that's the way the world kind of works nowadays.
Well, I was gonna say about those drones that even if they're not UFOs, those things are creepy, period. I mean,
Yeah.
if I was living there, and I saw dozens of them flying overhead constantly, every day for what, weeks and weeks now or something,
Mhm.
I would be like, "What the hell is going on?" I mean,
Sure.
it's unnerving, and maybe they're totally, benign and aren't gonna do anybody any harm, aren't intended to do any harm, but there's even if that's true, they're still really disrupting people's lives and unnerving them entirely, and,
Yeah.
so that's upsetting, and I think people have a right to know what's going on for sure. Just so if not for
Absolutely.
nothing, they could have a well, of course, they might lie to us to try to ease our minds or something, but, to have some kind of peace of mind, "Oh, okay, we don't have to worry about it," but even if I knew what it was and it was just, I don't know what, they're still got cameras on them, etcetera, I'm sure, and what are they doing there? What are they looking for? And who owns them? What's the
Right.
purpose? Is this what we're gonna have to live with forever going forward? We're supposed to put up with this as,
Right.
citizens? It doesn't seem right to me at all.
Right. It's more, I guess, the more they try to explain it away as nothing serious, the more interested I am in like kind of thinking that it's not something that we would have. They keep saying the drones, but then you see pictures of them and there's like look like giant planes, or not giant planes, but like small planes. And then you got people in New Jersey that are like shooting at them with shotguns, and it's like there's all these law enforcement that was supposedly out there shooting at them as well, trying to shoot them down. Now you got inquiries in the Senate and in the House that are like trying to approve for the government to shoot them down because nobody knows what they are. And it's just then you have stories that I don't know if they're true or not. I have no other information other than what I hear, but that there are drones used to detect nuclear gamma ray from like a nuclear bomb that's gone missing from some base up in New Jersey or something. They were
Oh, that's
expecting some kind of
nice.
shipment of like a nuclear, I think it was nuclear material that they were expecting a shipment of. And when it got to the port, it was damaged and everything that was inside was gone. So it was stolen.
Oh,
So there's a lot
great.
of like nuclear, I don't know, I guess material, whatever that's used for, probably to build rockets or missiles or whatever they do. The entire container was just empty. So they were
Wow. Oh
expecting
my
some kind
god.
of shipment and it was just gone.
Brother,
So
that's
there's
worse
all
than
kinds of stories.
UFOs.
That's definitely worse than UFOs. But it's like I tell people all the time. I used to work for the Department of Energy, and people would lose their minds if they found out how many nuclear missiles are on the back of semi trucks traversing U.S. highways every single day. You see semi trucks on the freeway every day. One of them is carrying a nuclear missile. Probably it's getting transported to another base or another site,
Mhm.
whatever. They're just driving them around all over the country, all the time, every single day. So that's a lot more. That's scarier than any kind of UFO going around or drone or whatever's going on. They're just out there in the open. So being
Oh,
transported,
boy.
you would think that they would carry them like in planes or something, just on the back of semi trucks, and they're driving past you out here on freaking I-75 or I-35 North. They're just with a nuclear bomb right next to you in the back of a semi truck.
Oh,
So that's
great.
fun.
Oh, well, that'll make you sleep well at night, won't it?
So good luck, everybody. Hope everybody gets some great sleep.
Oh, no.
No, it's great, but yeah, it's just wild. I mean, some of the crazy things that you've heard about them, and it's very interesting. Now they say it's gone back at least 3-4 years that these drones have been happening, but I don't remember this being like a huge issue back then. It could have been. I remember hearing a few things here and there, but like now it's ramping up again. So apparently it's just been there like the last 4 or 5 years.
Oh,
Nobody really
really
knows
that
what it
long?
is.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize even that. So when people who are seeing them, they're saying they look like small planes. Are
Mhm.
they labeling them as drones based on because that's what they think they are, or that's the closest example they can give to explain what they look like?
So, I mean, they started out as drones. They were small enough to be drones. Um, but I've seen some videos of the ones that they're like shooting at in New Jersey, and they look like small Cessna planes, like
Yeah.
that big, but that small, So, not like giant planes or anything, but they have like all the markings of planes. They got all the flashing lights on them. I don't know if they have like tail numbers on them or anything, but I mean, they're big enough to be small Cessna planes. So it's kind of a weird thing that they were labeled as drones to begin with. I've seen like UAPs, like actual military drones. And they're quite large. You wouldn't think they'd be that big, but they're huge, for the most part. But I've never seen anything like a small Cessna plane, like being a drone, unless actual like Air Force drones that fire missiles off, and that's a different thing. But like drones that somebody would be able to control off the ground, it's way bigger than you would see even like those large drones you could buy at the store. Like we're talking like 5-6 times larger than that. Look like small
Mhm.
Cessna planes. It's weird.
Mhm.
Flashing lights and everything, no sound, which is crazy. Also, like no heat
Yeah.
signatures, none of that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, there was a crash. I think that was here in Texas. People thought it was a drone, but it was like a small Cessna that actually crashed. Which I think was done on purpose, but that's just me, just to kind of throw everybody off. But that's what everybody was like, oh, it's that unidentified drone, but it was an actual plane. It looked like what was going on in Jersey, but I don't know. You don't hear about that out here. I haven't heard anything about that here, but I'm pretty sure it might be happening in other places as well. So it's
Mhm.
crazy. Just got to try to figure out what's going on.
Certainly is.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I guess as we kind of wind down here, Ms. Massey, could you kind of let everybody know where they can find the book when it's out and about, where they can kind of purchase the book and everything like that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I do have a link on my website where you can order it.
Right.
It'll take you right to it at donamasi.com. It's also, it's going to be in Barnes and Noble. I think it's probably up there now, or it will be. It was just released in the UK last week, and the published
Okay.
release date in the United States is January 1st, 2025. So it's the ebook is available to purchase for and be delivered right now from Amazon and other sites where that sell ebooks. And the print book,
Right.
um, you can pre-order it now, and it'll be delivered by January 2nd. And that's just because the print book hasn't been released yet in the United States, and they don't start
Sure.
shipping them until they're released. But that's just a couple of weeks away. So anyway, go to donamasi.com and there's a link there. I guess that's probably the most convenient place to go. There's a big order button, but it is being sold, you know, all over the world at different retailers and in
Right.
bookstores soon, I hope too.
Sure. Absolutely. We'll be keeping
The
our fingers
taking.
crossed for that. And absolutely. We
The
have all
taking
the
tells you
links.
kind of what it's about, sort of suggests
Sure.
it.
Sure. Absolutely. Straight to the point. We have all the links in the show notes as well after this, Facebook, and there's an Instagram for it as well. I think I saw, right? Is that up and running as well?
My Instagram account. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have an Instagram account. Yes.
Okay, okay. So we'll have everything linked in the show notes for everybody to go ahead and scoop that book up. It's, I guess, is there anything? I mean, do you have any plans on writing more books in this, kind of field as well? Anything on on the radar that we should be looking out for? Have you even started? I mean, I know this book is just about to come out, but is there anything that you're kind of eyeing for the future as well?
Well, I am writing another novel. I'm about 135 pages in. I haven't. Yeah, I got to get back to it. Just
Right.
this publishing stuff is takes a lot of time. It's all wonderful. It's fantastic. But it's just, and then plus I have a job, so
Sure.
um, it's just really, it's time consuming, but I got to get back to my new book. It's a different kind of genre, but it may have, because I don't, just briefly, I don't consider myself a science fiction writer, really. I'm a writer
Right.
who is really interested in this topic, and I am fascinated by the paranormal and, UFOs, etc. So that's what drew me to it. But I do like using sort of these paranormal elements in books, or when my writing, sometimes if they'll fit in naturally with the story. And I think I'm going to be able to find a place in the story I'm writing now to use a little bit of that. Not UFOs, but maybe some magical elements, or based on some folk tales of the culture. It's basically just, it's kind of inspired by my Italian American family on my dad's side, because I'm half
Right.
Italian American, and so it's kind of like inspired by their immigrant experience coming to the U.S. back in the um, early late 19th century, and then the next subsequent generations too. So it starts out in the 1940s. It goes back in time to before when the family came, and so it's set in the past. It's a period piece. I don't think I'll bring it to the present day, but it goes through a few generations of the family, and it's fiction, but it's inspired by my knowing these people and everything. So, and I
Absolutely.
might write a sequel for The Taking. We'll see.
Okay, sure. That's all. It all sounds great. Anything that we can kind of get our hands on when it comes to this field, it's very interested and very excited to read anything like that. So hopefully in the future, when you get that done, you'll do us the honor of coming back and we
Oh,
can
I'd
maybe
love
discuss
to.
that as well. And even if there's any other kind of subjects that you have in mind or things that you would want to speak about, whether it's related to UFOs or if it's anything else that's paranormal, we're always interested in stories and anything that's, anything where we can have a good time. So that's great. But I mean, I guess for everybody else, we'll have the links in the show notes, like I mentioned. This show's going to be going out everywhere after today, so everybody can get their hands on that as well. So, um, Ms. Massey, I really appreciate your time today for coming in, stopping by with us. I'll definitely be reaching back out as well. Please, if you have any other kind of information that you'd like to share with us, maybe you want to sit in and do some other kind of show that's related, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I'd love
We
to.
had a
We'll
great
see.
time. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Yes, ma'am.
invitation.
Absolutely. So, absolutely. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I appreciate your time. And I guess, do you take um, like stories from people as well? Do you kind of ask people to do that? Is there some kind of email where they can send you stories to as well?
Um, yeah, they can send me. Let's see. I They can contact me on my website. There's a contact
Okay.
page. Then yeah, I'd love to hear from people. Not only people with their experiences, and that would be wonderful, because I love these stories. But also people, I'm interested to know whether people believe in extraterrestrial UFOs, or interdimensional UFOs, whatever they happen to
Right.
be, or both. If they
Sure.
believe in aliens. I was actually thinking of doing a little uh, um, unofficial poll, unscientific poll of
Right.
people, to see if they believe or not, and
Sure.
why.
Sure. Absolutely. be a great way to gauge what the country's going through, or whether it's just here, anywhere else. But it's always I always ask, because I know a lot of people enjoy collecting stories or hearing stories that they've never heard about. I mean, there's a lot of people. If you can't speak to anybody in your family or anything like that, reach out to somebody else that's welcome and open to hearing these kinds of things. And I get so many stories as well here where they say things like, "Oh, I can't speak to my husband about this," or "I can't speak to my wife about this," or like my family or anything. So like, here's my story. So we get a lot of stories like that here as well. They're just looking to get it off their chest. So if anybody has any stories out there that they'd like to share with myself or Miss Massey, go ahead and do that. You can reach out to her as well through the website. You can reach out to us as always through all our social medias as well as email. So yeah, that's great news to hear. So Miss Massey, I really appreciate once again. Like I mentioned before, we'll be keeping an ear out as well, not just this book, but for the next one. And hopefully we can
Thank
have you
you.
back as well to go ahead and speak about that.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. It was good to meet you.
Absolutely. Likewise, it was great to meet you as well. Stay safe out there, and we'll speak again soon.
All right. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays as well. Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, everyone. I appreciate everybody's time. Like I mentioned, we're back at it again. So we got this show today. We'll be back on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Central Time with another guest as well. I don't remember. What are we? It's going to be, near-death experiences on Thursday. Near-death experiences and sacred scripture. So that's going to be the show that we have Thursday for everyone. Douglas, I think Douglas Hodgson is his name. Yeah, I think I got that right. He's actually going to be joining us from Australia. So for him, it'll be like 11 o'clock a.m. on a Friday morning. And for us, it'll be 9 p.m. Thursday night, Central Time. So everybody, please keep an eye out for that. That'll be going live on Thursday as well. But yeah, we're back in it. We're actually going to be having Preston back on. I don't remember. Like I mentioned, we had him set up for last week. Things didn't go up on my end, so it wasn't his fault. It was my fault. We got everything squared away now, so shows are going live. He'll be back on probably after the holidays. Obviously, Christmas is coming up, New Year's, and all that kind of stuff. People have got a lot of things going on. So I was very thankful that he was willing to come on prior to that last week. Didn't work out, so he's going to be making time after the holidays. As you can tell, we were speaking about the drone thing that was going on in New Jersey. So that'll be a show all by itself. I think we're going to be doing that with Jason coming up after Christmas as well. So that's coming up. Near-death experience on Thursday. Preston Dennett talking about underwater USOs. Then we're going to be speaking with Leo Zagami again. I think he has another book coming out. Waiting for times and dates to come back from him. So that's coming up. Rocking and rolling for the new year. Hope everybody has a great Christmas. Well, actually, I'll be speaking to you guys on Thursday, so it's not a farewell yet. We'll be getting all that set up and running. But yeah, so if you guys aren't already subscribers, please consider smashing that subscribe button for us, as well as that bell icon, so you guys don't miss an episode in the future. It's going to be coming on soon, as well as when we throw out recorded shows. Smashing that like button as well. That helps us out a lot. You can find us, as always, on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. I think Amazon Music's going away, isn't it? I think so. If you guys love what we do here on the show, and if you're feeling generous, consider sharing the show with a friend, family member, maybe a work colleague. You never know. Might be a little too spicy for the office. If you have any questions for myself, our guests, or guest topics or recommendations, as always, you can email that to thetruthDefender1776 at gmail.com. All the social media be linked in the show notes: Twitter, Getter, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, all the platforms on Linktree as well. We'll have that down below. Yeah, so I guess I'll see you guys Thursday night, 9 p.m. Central Time, near-death experiences, sacred scripture. As always, God, family, and Texas. Good night, y'all.